South Korea orders emergency safety inspection of airline operations after Jeju Air crash. Authorities announce probe as shocked citizens began a second day of official mourning. South Korea's acting president has ordered an emergency safety inspection of the country's entire airline operations, while authorities planned a separate check of all Boeing 737-800s. After 179 people died in a Jeju Air crash involving the aircraft on Sunday, the AS shocked citizens began a second day of official mourning and flags flew at half-mast. The government said it would carry out the audit of all 101 of the aircraft in domestic operation, with U.S. investigators, possibly including Boeing, joining the probe. Choi Sang-mok, who was appointed president 2 days before the disaster, said an exhaustive inspection was essential to overhaul the aviation safety system and move toward a safer Republic of Korea. But he was speaking as reports emerged that a passenger jet belonging to Jeju Air was forced to return to Gimpo Airport in Seoul soon after taking off on Monday, following an unspecified problem with its landing gear. Landing gear malfunction is among the issues being targeted by the investigation into Sunday's crash, which occurred after the plane skidded along the runway in what the aviation industry describes as a belly landing. Officials have confirmed that 179 of the 181 passengers and crew died when the Jeju airplane crashed into a wall at Muin International Airport shortly after attempting to land without its landing gear deployed. It is the country's worst domestic civil aviation disaster. 2 flight attendants, a man and a woman, were rescued from the tail of the aircraft, which burst into flames and broke apart upon impact with the wall. They were being treated at a hospital in Seoul after being transferred from hospitals near the airport. The Yonhap news agency said the male survivor was being treated for fractures to his ribs, shoulder blade, and upper spine, said Ju Wong, director of the Ua Women's University Seoul Hospital. Ju said the man, whose name has not been released, told doctors he woke up to find himself rescued. Details on the female survivor were not immediately available. Officials said the crash could have been caused by a bird strike and weather conditions, or a combination of those and other factors, but the exact cause was not yet known. The plane's flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder have been retrieved from the wreckage, but media reports said it could take longer than usual to determine the cause, as the flight data recorder had been damaged in the crash. Establishing the cause of a major air disaster typically takes months, and damage to the recorder was expected to cause further delays, Yonhap said, citing a land ministry official. Choi declared a 7-day mourning period starting Sunday, as he attempted to coordinate a response to a major disaster just days after he replaced his impeached predecessor, Han Duck-soo. Han, too, had been made interim leader after the impeachment in mid-December of Yoon Suk-yeol over his disastrous and short-lived declaration of martial law earlier in the month. The animosity of the past month appeared to have been put to one side as senior politicians from the ruling and opposition parties attempted to console a country in mourning. While the accident investigation will focus on the model of aircraft, there will inevitably be questions for the flight's operator. Jeju Air, the low-cost carrier, said it would do all it could to support the families of the victims, including with financial aid. Its chief executive, Kim Lee-bae, told a televised news conference he took full responsibility for the crash, irrespective of the cause, and bowed deeply in apology with other senior company officials. He said the company had not identified any mechanical problems with the aircraft following regular checkups, and that he would wait for the results of government investigations. Kim, though, was met with an angry response when he arrived at Muin and attempted to speak to grieving relatives in person. Investigators said 141 of the 179 victims had been identified using DNA analysis or fingerprint collection, according to a statement from the Land Ministry. Victims' families camped out at the airport overnight in special tents set up in the airport lounge after a long day waiting for news about their loved ones. "I had a son on board that plane," said an elderly man waiting in the airport lounge, who asked not to be named, adding that his son's body was among those that had not yet been identified. The control tower at Muin, 300 kilometers southwest of Seoul, issued a bird strike warning to the plane shortly before it intended to land and gave its pilot permission to land in a different area. The pilot sent out a distress signal shortly before the plane went past the runway and skidded across a buffer zone, Before hitting the wall, the crash was the worst on South Korean soil and one of the deadliest in its aviation history. The last time South Korea suffered a large-scale air disaster was in 1997, when a Korean air jet crashed in Guam, killing 228 people on board. In 2013, an Asiana Airlines plane crash-landed in San Francisco, killing 3 people and injuring 200. Most of the 175 passengers were South Korean nationals, along with 2 women from Thailand. Of the total, 82 were men and 93 were women, ranging in age from 3 to 78 years old. Many were in their 40s to 60s and were returning from winter holidays in Thailand when the accident occurred. Bunchway Duangmani, the father of one of the Thai passengers, told the Associated Press that his daughter, Jongluk, had been working in a factory in South Korea for several years and returned to Thailand to visit her family. "I never thought that this would be the last time we would see each other forever," he said. Jimmy Carter's death comes at a time when rancor and uncertainty prevail. The ex-president died as Biden, a fellow one-term president, heads for the door and chaos agent Trump returns to power. Early in Mike Bartlett's 2022 stage play, The 47th, the funeral of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter is held at Washington National Cathedral. Joe Biden, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton are all in attendance. Donald Trump is not invited but turns up anyway, and late. He's here to pay his disrespects and use/a funeral for self-promotion, Kamala Harris observes. Life, or rather death, is about to imitate art as Washington prepares to bid farewell to Carter, who died at home in Georgia on Sunday at the age of 100. He was the longest-lived president in U.S. history and the first Democratic president to die since Lyndon Johnson more than half a century ago. State funerals used to be nonpartisan occasions where Democrats and Republicans put their differences aside. But Carter's passing comes at a hinge moment when division, rancor, and uncertainty prevail. Biden, a fellow one-term president felled by inflation, is heading for the door. Trump, a chaos agent promising to wreak new havoc in the U.S. and beyond, returns to power on January 20th. Moments like this tell us as much about ourselves as they do about the person being honored and commemorated, John Meacham, a presidential historian, told the MSNBC network. And I think President Carter dying at this hour in the life of the Republic is a reminder that we are at the end of something. Carter became a friend and ally of the Republican he beat, Gerald Ford, while his presidential library was opened by his Republican successor, Ronald Reagan. Meacham added, "President Biden is trying very hard to be a pillar of that dignity and decorum, but it would be dishonest of us to not note that it's getting harder and harder for dignity and decorum to carry the day in the public square." Carter and Trump were born only 22 years apart, but may as well have come from different centuries. Carter grew up on a farm in Georgia, without electricity or running water. Trump had a comfortable upbringing in the affluent neighborhood of Jamaica Estates in Queens, New York. Carter attended the U.S. Naval Academy. Trump obtained a series of deferments during the Vietnam War. As president, Carter installed solar water heating panels on the roof of the White House. Trump called the climate crisis a hoax invented by China. Carter was married to one woman, Rosalind, for 77 years, though he did once admit to Playboy magazine that he committed adultery in my heart many times. The thrice-married Trump allegedly committed adultery with an adult film actor and has been accused of sexual misconduct by 24 women. After his presidency, Carter and Rosalind returned to live in their humble 2-bedroom house in Plains, Georgia. After Trump plotted his revenge amid the gaudy trappings of Trump Tower in New York and Mar-a-Lago in Florida. For years, Carter worked with Habitat for Humanity, helping build homes, sometimes with his own hands, for people in need across the world. Trump built his own property empire by fraudulently overvaluing his assets, a judge found last year. Carter biographer Jonathan Alter told The Guardian in 2020, "I sent Carter an email saying, 'Do you think you have anything in common with Donald Trump?' And I got back a one-word response, 'No, certainly in terms of their character, achievements, sense of responsibility. Jimmy Carter and Donald Trump have nothing in common.' And Carter, a born-again Christian, spent decades teaching Sunday school at the Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains. In a statement on Sunday, Barack and Michelle Obama suggested that many of the tourists who crammed the pews were there because of Carter's decency. The word was echoed by Biden at a press conference, but it is an increasingly unfashionable one in a time of indecent politics. Trump will soon be certified as the 47th president, for years to the day after he whipped up a furious mob to storm the U.S. Capitol in a failed bid to cling to power. He might also attend the state funeral for Carter, as he did for George H.W. Bush in 2018, awkwardly greeting former presidents he had publicly denigrated. During this year's election campaign, Trump frequently observed, "Jimmy Carter is happy now because he will go down as a brilliant president by comparison to Joe Biden." At the cathedral, Biden, who, like Carter, may hope that historians are kinder than voters to his legacy, will no doubt deliver a paean to the man he called a dear friend and a man of a bygone era. But with a heavy heart, he may also find himself giving a eulogy to a political epic gone with the wind.